the dumbest thing you've ever done when drunk? How did you feel afterward? In this totally heartbreaking case, the famous TikToker got really drunk and killed their friend. But how did it get there? Let's find out. Helen Rose Hastings was the only daughter of Susan Rosenberg and Philip Hastings, who were both successful biologists working at Baylor College of Medicine. She grew up in Houston, Texas, where she was described as a smart and highly intelligent girl, speaking in full sentences by the time she was just 18 months. Helen had a really great childhood, with lots of hobbies ranging from swimming to theater to rock bands and robotics. She was always curious and wanted to try out everything. She spent most of her school breaks traveling the world with her parents, going to far-flung places like Croatia, Oslo, and Tokyo. This really opened up her mind at a very young age, and by the time she was 7, she was fascinated by Japanese culture, and she told her mom that she wanted to start an institute for women scientists in Japan when she grows up. Sadly, she never got to see her dream materialize. Helen's almost perfect childhood changed the moment she reached middle school. She didn't fit in with her classmates who found her weird and started picking on her. At an early age, Helen had developed symptoms of misophonia, which is a condition that makes you intolerant to certain sounds made by other people, such as chewing, pencil tapping, coughing, and sniffling. As you can already guess, her condition got worse in school because those sounds are everywhere. It got to a point that Helen could not sit still in class or eat lunch with her classmates, which made her miserable, and her classmates really made her life in school difficult and unbearable. Things got worse when she started identifying as pansexual. A pansexual is someone who is attracted either emotionally or physically or both to people regardless of their gender. While this should not be taken as something bad or negative, the other students did not understand this, and so they bullied her when they learned that she had a relationship with another girl in school. Because of all this bullying and harassment, the once vibrant and outgoing girl became depressed, anxious, and even developed an eating disorder. She spent most of her time alone and felt that nobody liked her or understood her. But as they say, there's a place for everyone in the world, and Helen was lucky to find hers. It all started in 8th grade, when one of Helen's few friends invited her to a local cosplay convention. If you don't already know what cosplay is, it's like kind of performance art, where people dress up in costumes and makeup that represent their favorite characters from anime, video games, TV, and film. The term itself was derived from 2 words, costume and roleplay. So people don't just dress up, they act and behave like the character they are portraying. The cosplay culture is actually very popular in many parts of the world, most especially Japan, East Asia, the US, and Europe. Helen was really captivated by this fun and exciting world and saw it as an interesting way to escape her sad and depressing reality. Helen was drawn to the escapism of it. Some people view it as an escape from reality. They're not human, they're this character. For 3 days, they don't have to think about what's going on in the outside world. In this community, Helen fit right in, and it became part of her. She was a talented cosplayer, and within no time, she had established herself in the cosplay community and acquired quite a number of followers on TikTok and Instagram, where she would post her cosplay videos. Although her mom Susan was a bit skeptical of Helen's newfound interest, she was happy that her daughter had gotten out of her depression and was making friends. I saw that it was a community of people who, in some way or other, didn't fit in, and they had this group of people with whom they could. One of the few friends that Helen met in the cosplay community was Mary Ann Oliver Snow, otherwise known as Yandere Freak, or Snow, the Salt Queen in the cosplay world. Snow was a few years older than Helen and identified as non-binary, using they/them pronouns. They were also from Houston, Texas, and had been in the cosplay world since 2016. Their videos in different outfits and hairdos garnered millions of likes and made them sort of a celebrity, with over 1.6 million followers on TikTok. They are particularly well known for cosplaying characters from a series called Danganronpa, a Chinese video game in which teens are locked inside a school with a murderous bear and forced to fight to the death. Those who knew Snow described them as being a little problematic and reckless. They would do things that a lot of people found to be quite inappropriate and disturbing. Like in 2019, Snow posted a video on social media where they were having a cosplay photo shoot at a local cemetery. They were sitting on the gravestones, swinging on them, and even dancing on top of them. This really enraged a lot of people who found Snow's actions as being disrespectful to the dead in the cemetery. And instead of apologizing for their actions, Snow made things worse by mocking everyone, saying that people were just overreacting and that they did nothing wrong. They also claimed that they had asked permission from the management to have a photo shoot there. However, the cemetery superintendent came forward to deny this and even threatened to have Snow arrested if they go back to the cemetery. And that's not all, guys. In another incident, Snow claimed that they had rescued some sick kittens and asked for money from their followers to help save the kittens. But people later came to learn that the kittens were never really sick and that Snow had pocketed the money. Despite all the controversies, Helen and Snow became really good friends and started hanging out together quite often. But this friendship would soon end in a disaster. Now, fast forward to January 17th, 2021. The police received a distress call from a house in Houston where someone was reported to have been shot. The person was rushed to the hospital where they sadly passed away. This person was no other than Helen Hastings. At the time of her passing, she had been a freshman at Oberlin College in Ohio, where she intended to study neuroscience, psychology, and art. Her friends in college described her as an incredibly warm and friendly person who was always welcoming to people. I think the first thing she said to me was complimenting my jacket or something. And from then on, we became close friends really quickly because she was such a bright and warm person. The news of Helen's death was released across social media on January 20th, 2021, and her family and friends were totally devastated. There were no details on what really happened and how she died, and for months, no one had the answers to these questions. But when the truth finally came out, everyone was completely horrified. Now, we all have different ways of grieving when we lose someone we care about. Some of us may grieve openly while others may do so in secret. If you're active on social media, you'd probably post something about your friend, or maybe take a break from posting for a while to grieve. This was not the case with Snow, who was acting like they didn't just lose a close friend. They were posting cosplay videos regularly on TikTok and Instagram, and did not even for one moment mention Helen anywhere in their posts. But although some people found it strange, they never would have thought that Snow was actually involved in their friend's death. According to the police report, Snow, Helen, and 5 other friends were gathered at Snow's house for a party. They were drinking, smoking, and generally just messing around. Then, at midnight, they decided to watch the Batman-inspired series Gotham and cosplay the characters. At this point, Snow announced that they had a gun, just like the character Penguin in the series, and then they went out to the garage to get it. They brought the gun into the living room, and everyone started playing and messing around with it. Now here's when things took a really dark turn. One of the friends came up to Snow and jokingly said, "Ooh, shoot me." Snow raised up the gun for a moment and then lowered it. Then Helen, wanting to fit in, said, "Oh, do me." And Snow was like, "Okay." Then turned to their right and placed the gun to the left side of Helen's head and pulled the trigger. They all watched in horror as the gun went off and Helen fell to the ground bleeding. All along, they thought the gun was empty, but clearly it wasn't. The group was in a panic. One tried to stop the blood with a teddy bear, and Snow kept saying it was an accident. Somehow they managed to call 911, and Helen was rushed to the hospital, where she was placed on life support but died 2 days later. Snow was later arrested and charged with second-degree manslaughter, which carries a potential prison sentence of 2 to 20 years, according to Texas state laws. They told police that the gun had been left in their home by an ex-boyfriend when he moved out, and that they and their friends would often play with it, believing that it was safe. Snow said that the ex-boyfriend had said that he'd removed all the bullets in the magazine, and that they didn't remember putting it back in the gun, though they were really drunk and could have done it. They said they were putting the gun at themselves and other friends, and it was making a clicking sound when they pulled the trigger 3 or 4 times. When the other friends were interrogated, they said that they also didn't think that the gun was loaded, and that they heard Helen jokingly ask Snow to shoot her. When investigators asked them why Snow would place a gun at Helen's head, one witness said their group is wild, dumb, and does jokes like that all the time. On January 19th, 2021, Snow was released on a $20,000 bond, and they went back to living their life as if nothing had happened. They continued posting for 9 months and could actually be seen in some video wearing an ankle monitoring bracelet. Some of their TikTok videos are quite gory and involve fake blood splatters in the background and references to violence. Now, this was really disturbing for a lot of people who felt that Snow didn't really care about taking Helen's life. One person wrote in their comment, "What a huge slap in the face to the families of the victims to be posting like this." However, others were a little more sympathetic to Snow, saying that they'd also lost someone and were working through it. Let them grieve and move on. They lost a close friend just a few months ago and will live with that guilt forever. Snow has since made their TikTok and Instagram accounts private, and according to their lawyer, they're distancing themselves from social media for a while. The lawyer also said that Snow was incredibly remorseful about what took place and was having a difficult time dealing with it. Meanwhile, Helen's family and friends continue to remember her for her really bubbly and energetic personality and sense of humor. I was grateful to have both empathy and excitement from them. To top it all off, they did it while having the cutest llama socks you would find. They generally just had a great fashion sense. Thanks, Helen, for being a first friend. This won't be the last time we celebrate you. Think about your best friend, that person that you love so much and would go to the ends of the earth to protect. You've probably known each other for years, and you always have each other's back. You share all your secrets and dreams with them, and they pretty much know everything about you. Now, imagine that friend betraying you in the worst kind of way. Horrifying, completely unimaginable, right? That's the kind of horror that Stephen McAfee went through. Everything in his life took a dark turn, and he lost his life. Let's dive in. Stephen Christopher McAfee was born on December 26, 1996, to his mom Suzanne and dad Michael. He had two siblings, Jonathan and Kate, and they all lived in Macomb Township, a safe and affluent suburb in Detroit, Michigan. When Stephen was in elementary school, he was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome. Asperger's syndrome is a developmental disorder on the autism spectrum, affecting the ability to effectively socialize and communicate. While people with Asperger's may be socially awkward, they are often highly intelligent. Despite his diagnosis, Stephen wanted to live his life to the fullest. He was a super creative artist who also loved playing the drums and listening to records. Stephen was described as a soft-spoken, well-behaved, and kind person who always stayed away from trouble. But just like other bad things in life, trouble found him when he least expected it. On March 10, 2016, Stephen had stayed up late watching TV with his dad. At around 2:30 a.m., his dad went to bed and left Stephen on the couch, scrolling through his phone. He never imagined that it would be the last time he would see his son alive. Early the following day, everyone woke up to find Stephen gone. He did not leave anything to say where he was going. All of his personal belongings were still in his room, including his phone charger. Stephen never went anywhere without his charger. They tried calling his phone, but it went straight to voicemail. It just didn't make sense. Stephen was learning how to drive, so he didn't have a car or a driving license. In fact, he had made plans with his mom to go out later in the day and practice his driving around town. So wherever he went, he had gone on foot, or someone had picked him up. But none of the people that hung out with him had seen him. He hadn't even taken any extra clothes to indicate that he would be going away for a while. What made his family even more anxious was that Stephen had never stayed away from home without contacting someone. The whole situation was totally suspicious. So they looked in all his regular hangout spots, but he was nowhere to be seen. It was like he had just vanished into thin air, leaving no clue behind. 3 days passed without any sign of Stephen, and his parents were getting sick with worry, not knowing what had happened to their son. So they went to the county sheriff's office and filed a missing person report. They also took to social media and pleaded with the public to help them search for Stephen. Everyone who knew Stephen came in to help with the search. They distributed thousands of missing person flyers around the area, but nothing came out of it. The local Crime Stoppers even offered a reward of several $1,000s to anyone with information that would bring Stephen home, but still, no one came forward. Suzanne and Michael at one point hired a private investigator to see if he would be successful in finding their son, but sadly, this too was all in vain. At this time, rumors had started going around that Stephen might have been mixed up with some sketchy people who may have ended his life. Stephen's friends and family disputed this narrative, saying that Stephen was a good and honest person and would never get involved in criminals. But as time passed without a solid lead as to where Stephen's whereabouts, the case started to go cold. That's until April 2017, a year after Stephen went missing, when the county sheriff's office got an unexpected visitor who revealed a twisted and dark secret that would shock everyone. She told the police that her friend, Yvette MacDonald, had confided in her that she helped her then-boyfriend dispose of Stephen's body. But what was even more shocking was the identity of this ex-boyfriend.
He was given information by the ex-girlfriend of Mr. Fiacco that Andrew had shot Stephen, and that she helped in disposing the body.
Andrew Fiacco had been Stephen's best friend. The two met while in elementary school and had been friends for over 10 years. They hung out together all the time and got into various mischiefs together. Like Stephen, Andrew was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome. Since Stephen went missing, Andrew had been playing the act of a grieving friend pretty well, even posting on Facebook saying how much he missed Stephen. In one post, he wrote, and I quote, "I miss him so much. Please come home, brother. We all miss you very much." He would regularly check on Stephen's distraught family and act like he was helping them in their search, while all along, he knew that Stephen was never coming home, at least not alive. That is just sick, and it goes to show how deceitful and twisted people can be. The investigators also noted that in 2016, they had interviewed Andrew 2 times about his friend's disappearance, and both times he denied involvement and acted like he didn't know anything. But what would make someone do something so vicious to his friend? After this chilling revelation, the police went out and brought Andrew and Yvette into custody, and that's when their story started to unravel. Andrew told the police that on that fateful morning at around 3 a.m., he received a call from Stephen, who wanted to buy some narcotics from him.
So when I saw him in the pot, I took my brother's gun.
Andrew went and picked Stephen up and drove over to an empty parking lot before walking into the woods to do their business. Then, according to Andrew, Stephen refused to pay and charged at him.
He attacked me, and I was like, I was caught off guard. Then we started wrestling it out. He grabbed the gun, pointed at me. So I distracted and ran up to him and took it. We were wrestling on the ground, and the gun went off, and he got hit with it.
In a panic, he fired at Stephen 2 more times to make sure that he was dead, and then fled the area. Andrew maintained that he was defending himself from Stephen when he took his life. After the confession, Andrew took the police to 2 places of interest, a wooded area in the Bruce Township and Andrew's home in Ray Township. There, they found 2 separate graves with human remains, which were identified as Stephen's. The grave in Bruce Township contained a lower jawbone and clothes, while the other grave had the rest of his remains. With so much incriminating evidence against him, Andrew faced several charges, including first-degree homicide, a felony firearms offense, disinterment, and desecration of a body, and lying to the police. Yvette was charged with being an accessory after the fact to a serious felony, disinterment, desecration of a body, and lying to the police. The 2 stood trial in 2019, and during the process, some new twists to the story would emerge. Before the trial, Yvette had struck a plea deal and agreed to testify against Andrew. She told the court that Andrew had been jealous of Stephen because he thought she and Stephen were having a relationship behind his back. She said that before Stephen disappeared, Andrew had accused her of sleeping with Stephen, and the 2 had fought over it. The prosecutor used Yvette's testimony to show that Andrew had a motive to take Stephen's life when he picked him up that morning. He also questioned why Andrew had brought a gun with him when he went to meet Stephen.
That's why he has to bring a gun. Because if you think in his voice that he's distressed and that you need to take your brother's gun, then why do you leave your house at 3:30 in the morning? Why do you pick him at 4 in the morning?
This theory was corroborated by the testimony from the medical examiner, who showed that the angles at which the bullets entered Stephen's body could not have been the act of self-defense, as Andrew had claimed. He testified that Stephen had been hit twice on the head, one on the front and another to the back, and then again in the stomach. The trial also had several heated moments, which resulted in a shouting match between the defense and prosecutor. Stephen's mother also testified that Stephen had once told her that Andrew had done some despicable things to him. This statement was met with angry and loud objection from the defense, which the judge sustained as hearsay. Eventually, the jury reached a verdict after deliberating for 11 hours. They found Andrew guilty of a lesser crime of second-degree homicide, believing that while he did commit the crime, there was no evidence that it had been premeditated. Andrew was sentenced to 50 to 70 years in prison, but before his sentencing, he put on a show in court, breaking into tears when Stephen's family spoke at the hearing. He also told the court that he was sorry for what he did.
I have nightmares. I miss you so much. I'm so sorry.
However, Stephen's family was not moved by his crocodile tears and called him a monster and sociopath who was a threat to everyone around him. They were disappointed when the jury found him guilty of the lesser charge of second-degree homicide. They wanted a first-degree homicide conviction, which carries a life sentence without parole. The judge was also not moved by Andrew's little performance and told him that his actions had destroyed many people's lives.
You've destroyed not only Stephen's life, but his family and friends. You've destroyed your family's life as well as your own.
Andrew was sentenced to 50 to 70 years behind bars, meaning he won't be a free man until at least 2069, when he will be over 70 years old. Yvette McDonald pleaded guilty to her charges and was sentenced to just 1 year in prison. It's sad to imagine that someone we trust can turn against us in such a cruel way. Stephen was the unfortunate target of betrayal from someone he considered a true friend. It will take a long time before his family even come close to recovering from this unjust tragedy, but hopefully they can take solace in knowing that Andrew will be away for a long time. People with learning difficulties already have it pretty rough, and most just want to live the most normal lives they can. But what happens when they find it hard to tell a real friend from a truly evil person? Unfortunately, in this upsetting case from the UK, 5 horrible people did take advantage of a very vulnerable woman, and they went on to do some truly evil things to her. So brace yourselves, okay? Let's dive in. Gemma Hayter was a very trusting woman in her mid-20s. She lived in Rugby in the UK. Her family had always known that she was a little different from her classmates, and they suspected she was autistic.
I knew from a very early age that there was something not right. Gemma was completely different to my other 2 children and completely different to any other child I'd ever met, and that was obvious from a very early age.
But despite repeatedly testing her and trying to get help for Gemma, none of the agencies had ever formally diagnosed her with a learning disability. For this reason, it was super difficult to get real help for Gemma. She often struggled with knowing when to wash and clean herself up, and like I said, she was extremely trusting. Now, she had a pretty happy childhood, but when she got older, she was totally desperate to leave the family home and become more independent. Despite her family's worries about this, they finally agreed to it, and she was an adult by then, so they really couldn't stop her anyway. In her mid-20s, Gemma moved away into a small council-owned apartment in a tower block. Her family hoped she was okay, but she would never let them in to visit. Then, on August 9th, 2010, a jogger found Gemma's body by some disused railway tracks. The police investigated as what happened to her looked very strange, and it didn't take very long to narrow down who had hurt her. You see, the flat Gemma had moved into was a place that also rehomed ex-convicts and dealers. Basically, she was living near a lot of people who knew exactly how to spot someone vulnerable and easy to take advantage of. Gemma had no way to understand that they weren't good people. She was just totally pleased to have a group of buddies to hang out with. These so-called friends were Daniel Newstead, Chantal Booth, Joe Bayer, Jessica Lanus, and Duncan Edwards. They'd been convincing Gemma to shoplift for them and buy them things with her benefit money. They had made her keep Class A drugs in her flat, which she'd been told were presents. It's so sketchy, but she only did all that because she was convinced they were her best mates. She wanted to be nice to them, you know? But that gross situation suddenly got even darker. On a Saturday evening, on August 7th, 2010, all 6 of them had been trying to get into a nightclub. Now, Gemma had playfully joked that Chantal wasn't old enough to get in. This meant they were turned away from the club. Angry, Chantal and Jess hit Gemma and yelled at her, so Gemma went home. The attack began the next day when Gemma went to Chantal's house. She just wanted to pick up her bag, but that was a horrible trick. This is where it all gets really bad, so here goes. Once Gemma was at their apartment, they started to hurt her. They wrapped masking tape around her face and put urine into a beer can and forced Gemma to drink it. She was thrown against a radiator, which broke her nose. Then they hit her with a mop, threw her phone in a toilet, and locked her in a small bathroom. After this disgusting treatment, they led her out of Chantal's place. In the CCTV footage of her last moments, you can see they're all wearing hoodie tops. Gemma is carrying a white bag and rubbing at her nose because it's still bleeding here. Personally, I think it really looks like they knew what they were planning to do next and were trying to hide their faces. It probably wasn't that cold in August, right? They told her they were just walking her home. Very friendly, right? But this was another total lie. Instead, just before they got there, the gang turned in the opposite direction towards a disused railway track. Remember, Jenna went along, probably because she didn't really understand what they were doing or why any of this was happening. As far as she was concerned, they were her friends with no reason to harm her.
Gemma would have been like breathing
sigh of relief, you know, only got to get around the corner, only got to get around the corner.
Once they were at the railway bank, they went the other way. The sickos put a bin liner on Gemma's head. They stomped on her head and stabbed her in the back. Then for some reason, they also took off all of Gemma's clothes and tried to burn them. Gemma eventually drowned in the blood from her broken nose. I can't even begin to imagine how that felt.
I mean, I don't know, the whole thing's just so sad. Her life was just so shit all along. So for her to die in such a, it's just everything about it horrible.
In the UK, this kind of thing is known as a mate crime. Now, mate is a British term for friend, and the crime itself is defined as when a perpetrator befriends a vulnerable person to then exploit the person financially, physically, or sexually. I mean, what kind of person even does this to someone as vulnerable and sweet as Gemma? The family was heartbroken, and Gemma's niece was totally horrified to learn she'd been to school with some of the teenagers who did this. She really couldn't believe that they were able to do it, although she had always steered clear of Chantal and Jess. But even once they were caught by the cops, the gang didn't even seem to be that sorry. They treated the whole arrest as a big joke, even laughing and being idiots in the courtroom. One of them even looked forward to prison, thinking he would get a PlayStation and a DVD player and laze around all day. In 2011, they were all found guilty of a disability hate crime and were given sentences ranging from 13 to 21 years. That's what life tends to mean in the UK. And honestly, it seems pretty light. They'll probably be let out before they're even 40. The judge even said to them that this case was a chronicle of heartlessness. It's difficult to find the words to express how vile your behavior was. Now, none of it was helped by the fact that Gemma was never formally diagnosed with a disability. If she had been, that would have given her some much needed extra care, like a social worker. She had been seen by a lot of agencies, but for some reason, her issues were never pinned down. Once Gemma was in her mid-20s, the council decided to check again if she needed help living alone. The guy who did the assessment said she was fine to fend for herself, but her family wasn't convinced that the assessor did a very good job.
The guy that had supposedly done the assessment at our house consisted of him being in my house for 10 or 15 minutes. And during that time, Gemma actually went outside into the garden to have a cigarette. So he hadn't seen Gemma in all that time.
And that was the end.
About a year before she passed away, Gemma even wrote to the council services to request some help with cleaning her flat. Remember I said that she had to be reminded to stay clean as she was growing up? Well, this was the state of her flat while she was living on her own. It's not too surprising that she wouldn't ever let her mom go inside. I guess because she wanted to stay independent, but you can see it was in a really awful mess. And quite a lot of other authorities also failed to help her. This kind of attack on vulnerable people is still a really awful problem. Sadly, it was recorded in 2018 that crimes against people with disabilities have risen by 300% in the UK since 2011. Gemma's sister Nikki is still working to prevent this from happening to anyone else. In a vlog she made about 5 years later, Nikki described confronting some teenagers who were harassing a homeless man with mental health issues. The 3 guys she spoke to actually seemed to think about what they'd done, so she really hopes she got through to a few of them. I hope so too. The craziest thing is that Gemma's mom believes her daughter would have totally forgiven the monsters that did this.
Well, even though they did that to her, I'm quite sure that if she survived it, she'd have forgiven them.
Gemma definitely deserved a better life, but nobody should have to go through that at the hands of a bunch of people who were pretty clearly sick and twisted. In the UK, there has been a campaign to stop gangs from exploiting vulnerable people in their homes. In the UK, an independent charity called Crime Stoppers is trying to help. So if you think anything like this is happening in the UK, you can call them up anonymously on 0800 555 111. What do you think about this case? Did the gang get a fair sentence, and could anyone have protected Gemma from them? Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below.